After moving into an isolated countryside house to escape his past, a man begins hearing subtle sounds coming from above the ceiling. Slow movements, careful shifts, as if something is learning the structure of the house from the inside. At first, he dismisses it as animals, wood-settling imagination. But the sounds grow deliberate, intentional. As the isolation deepens, sleep fractures and perception becomes unreliable. The narrator realizes the thing above him is not trapped. It is patient. And worse, it does not want to come down violently. It wants to be acknowledged. Some presences don't break into your home. They wait until you accept they belong there. The first night I heard it, I convinced myself it was nothing. That decision, that small, lazy act of denial, was the moment everything truly began. The house was old, but not abandoned old. It had history without decay, the kind of place that creaked for honest reasons. Wood expands, nails loosen, roofs breathe when the temperature drops at night. I knew all of that. I needed to know all of that. That's why the sound didn't scare me at first. It came just after midnight, when the countryside silence had fully settled. That deep rural quiet where even insects seemed to agree not to interrupt. I was lying in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to my own breathing slow. Then I heard it. A soft shift, not a scratch, not a scuttle, a weight redistributing itself. Directly above my head, I stopped breathing. The sound wasn't chaotic or hurried. It didn't resemble the frantic movement of an animal trapped in insulation. It was measured, careful, as if whatever was up there understood exactly how much pressure the ceiling could tolerate. I waited. Silence returned. My heart slowed. My body relaxed. Old house, I told myself. Wood settling. I turned on my side and forced myself to sleep. That was mistake number 2. I had moved to the countryside to escape people, not because I hated them, but because I no longer trusted myself around them. Grief has a way of leaking into conversations, twisting words into something heavier than they're meant to be. Out here, no one expected anything from me. The nearest neighbor was far enough that I couldn't see their lights at night. The road disappeared after sunset. The house stood alone, which meant that every sound belonged to it, or to me, or to something else. The second night, the sound came again, this time closer to the corner of the room, a slow drag, then a pause, then another subtle shift, as if something were adjusting its position after learning where the beams were. My stomach tightened. I sat up in bed and listened, eyes fixed on the ceiling even though I knew it was useless. There was nothing to see. Just darkness and old paint. Stop, I whispered. The word felt ridiculous the moment it left my mouth. The sound didn't react. It didn't retreat. It didn't accelerate. It simply waited. That's when the paranoia began to seed itself. Because animals react to sound, this thing reacted to attention. By the 4th night, sleep became fragmented. I found myself lying awake, counting seconds, waiting for the sound. Anticipation replaced fear, and that was worse. Fear burns hot and fast. Anticipation stretches. At exactly 2:17 a.m., something shifted above the ceiling fan, not across, not randomly. Directly toward the center of the room, I felt pressure in my chest, irrational but overwhelming, like the space above me was no longer empty. I stood up, grabbed a flashlight, and aimed it uselessly at the ceiling. "Hello?" I called. The word echoed slightly, then silence. Not the comforting silence of absence, but the deliberate silence of something that has learned when not to move. My hands shook. I turned the light off and sat back down on the bed. And that's when the thought came, uninvited and fully formed. It knows when I'm listening. I didn't sleep at all after that. During the day, the house looked normal, too normal. Sunlight filled the rooms. Dust floated lazily in the air. The ceiling showed no stains, no cracks, no signs of intrusion. I checked the attic hatch, locked, undisturbed. No footprints, no insulation displaced, which should have been comforting. Instead, it made everything worse. Because whatever was moving above me didn't need access. It was already there. That night I didn't wait in bed. I sat in a chair, staring upward, refusing to lie down. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Relief crept in, thin and fragile. See? I told myself. Nothing. At 2:17 a.m., the chair creaked softly beneath my weight, and above me, something shifted in response. Not startled, not surprised, aware. That was the moment I understood the most dangerous truth of all. The thing in the ceiling wasn't trapped. It was observing, learning where I rested, learning when I listened, learning when I chose to pretend nothing was wrong. And it was very, very patient. After the first week, I stopped asking what it was. That question assumes an answer you can recognize. What replaced it was worse. I started asking when. My days reorganized themselves around the ceiling. I didn't notice it immediately. No conscious decision marked the change. It happened the way habits always do, quietly, efficiently, without discussion. I stopped standing still in certain rooms. I stopped lying flat in bed. I stopped using the chair beneath the center beam. Instead, I moved along the edges of the house, favoring walls, door frames, places where the ceiling felt less attentive. The thing above me noticed, not because it moved, because it didn't. The sounds no longer came randomly at night. They arrived only when I did something predictable, when I sat, when I lay down, when I stopped moving long enough to become a location instead of a transition. That realization broke something in me, because animals don't wait like that. Sleep became a negotiation. I would lie in bed, muscles locked, eyes open, counting my breathing. Minutes passed, sometimes hours. Nothing happened. Then, just as exhaustion began to win, the ceiling would answer. A slow compression, not footsteps, not crawling, a settling. As if weight were being lowered with care, testing limits, memorizing structure. The first time I heard it directly above my chest, I gagged. The sound wasn't loud. That was the problem. Loud things announce themselves. Loud things want to be found. This thing behaved like it didn't want to be discovered. It wanted to be accepted. I tried to introduce chaos. I changed my routine deliberately, slept at different hours, moved furniture, stayed awake all night, slept during the day. For 2 nights, the ceiling remained quiet. Relief washed through me, fragile and desperate. Then, on the 3rd night, I heard it shift before I stopped moving. That was when I understood. It wasn't reacting to me anymore. It was anticipating. My heart pounded so hard I felt dizzy. "You're not real," I whispered. The ceiling didn't answer. It adjusted. During the day, I began hearing things that couldn't be happening. A soft drag above me when I stood still too long. A pressure change when I entered a room. Once, a faint sound like something exhaling through wood. I checked the attic again. Nothing. No smell, no heat, no disturbance. Which meant one of 2 things. Either I was losing my mind, or the thing above me didn't need space the way I did. Guilt started surfacing in strange ways. Memories I hadn't thought about in years slipped into my thoughts without warning. Things I'd said, things I'd avoided, moments where silence had been easier than action. The presence above me didn't comment, but every time a memory grew heavy, the ceiling shifted gently, almost soothingly, as if acknowledging, as if listening. That was the most terrifying part. It didn't feel hostile, it felt interested. On the 10th night, I broke. I stood in the middle of the living room, stared at the ceiling and spoke clearly. "I know you're there." The words echoed. Silence followed. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined everything. Then the ceiling creaked, not from strain, but from movement. Slow, deliberate, centered directly above me. I felt my knees weaken. It stopped. And in that stillness, a thought slid into my mind, fully formed, calm and undeniable. "You finally looked up." I staggered back, breath ragged. The ceiling remained still, but something fundamental had changed, because now I knew the truth. The thing above me didn't need to come down. It didn't need to scare me. It only needed to know when I would acknowledge it, and I had just done exactly that. After I acknowledged it, the house changed its behavior, not visibly, not in ways that could be proven, It changed in a tension. I stopped hearing it every night. That should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like being ignored by something that had already learned everything it needed. The absence of sound was heavier than the noise ever had been. Silence, I learned, can feel like surveillance when you know it's intentional. I would lie in bed, staring upward, heart racing, waiting for the ceiling to respond. It didn't, but I could feel it. A pressure in the room, a subtle distortion in the air, like gravity had shifted just enough to be noticed by the nervous system, but not by instruments. I began sleeping in short bursts, waking abruptly with the certainty that something had been happening while I wasn't aware enough to remember it. That certainty was worse than proof. The house developed preferences. Some rooms felt wrong now, the kitchen ceiling pressed low, as if it were closer than it had been before. The living room felt stretched, elongated, as though the space above it extended farther than architecture allowed. I avoided standing still. Movement became safety. Motion kept me undefined. Whenever I stopped, whenever I became a fixed point, I felt the ceiling notice, not react, notice. Once, while brushing my teeth, I felt a soft vibration above me, synchronized with my breathing. When I held my breath, it paused. When I exhaled, it resumed. That was the first time I had to fight the urge to laugh, because if I laughed, it would mean I still believed this was happening to me. I was starting to suspect it was happening with me. I tried to measure it, placed cups of water on the floor, watching for ripples, hung a string from a nail, looking for movement. Nothing. Physics refused to cooperate, but my body didn't. My shoulders ached constantly, like I was bracing without realizing it. My neck stayed tense, my jaw locked at night. I began dreaming of ceilings that opened silently, revealing not space but depth, endless layers of beams, insulation, shadow, receding upward into something that felt infinite and intimate at the same time. In those dreams, nothing came down. Something simply looked. The sound returned on the 12th night, not above me, behind me. I was standing in the hallway when I heard it. A slow, careful shift that didn't come from the ceiling over my head, but from the space above the room I had just left. It had followed. The realization landed gently, almost politely. I turned slowly, heart pounding, eyes tracking the ceiling line as if I could catch it in the act of relocating. Nothing moved, but I felt it reposition itself in my awareness, like a weight redistributing inside a body that wasn't mine. The house didn't creak in protest, it accommodated. I stopped checking the time. There was no point, whatever it was didn't follow hours or routines. It followed states, exhaustion, stillness, attention. One night, sitting on the floor with my back against the wall, I whispered, "What do you want?" The question wasn't brave, it was tired. The ceiling didn't respond with sound. It responded with understanding. A calm settled over the room, deep and heavy, like a hand resting on my chest. The thought came, not invasive, not loud, to stay where you no longer look up. My throat tightened, because I realized I had already begun to do exactly that. The final moment of the night came without drama. I stood beneath the center beam of the house, directly under the place that had once terrified me most. Nothing happened, no sound, no movement, just the unmistakable feeling of being observed from a distance that was no longer physical. That's when the truth became unavoidable. The ceiling had never been the threat, it was the threshold, and whatever lived above it no longer needed to move, because it had learned where I would stand, where I would avoid, where I would stop resisting. The abyss wasn't overhead anymore, it was aligned, and it was looking back through me. The moment I realized the ceiling no longer mattered was the moment I stopped feeling safe anywhere in the house. Because fear has boundaries, and mine had just been erased. The house began to anticipate me, not in obvious ways, nothing cinematic, nothing dramatic. It was subtler than that. Lights were already on when I entered rooms I used most. Floors creaked less where I walked often. Air felt heavier in places I avoided. The ceiling no longer moved above me. It didn't need to. I felt it around me now. not as presence, but as expectation. Like the house already knew where I would stand, where I would pause, where I would give up trying to feel in control. I started finding marks, not scratches, not holes, indentations, slight depressions in the plaster near the ceiling beams, so faint they could be explained away as age, settling, coincidence. But they followed me, above the bed, above the chair I favored, above the exact spot in the hallway where I often stopped without realizing it. I measured once. The distance between the floor and the marks was always the same. As if something had learned how far above me it needed to be. Sleep stopped feeling restorative. I would wake with the sense that time had been used, not passed, as if hours had been spent on something that wasn't me. Sometimes I woke facing the ceiling. Sometimes my body had turned without my memory. Once I woke standing, in the living room, directly under the central beam. My legs ached as if I had been there for a long time, waiting. I sat down hard, heart racing, trying to piece together how I'd gotten there. The house offered no resistance. It never did. I spoke less. Not because I was afraid to speak, but because words felt unnecessary, heavy, inefficient. Thoughts arrived cleaner now, shorter. Don't stand there. Move. Stay near the wall. Look down. Those thoughts felt like mine. That was the scar. Not invasion, integration. One night, I deliberately stood beneath the ceiling and refused to move. I stared up. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. No sound, no pressure, no movement. Relief surged, sharp and desperate. Then the thought came, calm and unmistakable. You don't need to look up anymore. My eyes dropped without conscious decision. And the moment they did, I felt it, not above me, not behind me, but aligned, like something had settled into the same posture as my attention. That was when I understood the permanent damage. The ceiling hadn't been watching me. It had been teaching me where not to look. I didn't leave the house after that, not because I couldn't, because the idea felt irrelevant. Outside required orientation, decisions, uncertainty. Inside, everything was already arranged. I lay in bed that night, eyes fixed on the wall instead of the ceiling. Sleep came quickly, too quickly, and just before it took me, a final realization settled in, heavy, complete, irreversible. The thing that had moved in the ceiling never needed to come down. It had simply waited until I learned how to make room for it inside my awareness, and now there was nothing left for it to do but remain. The first time the house answered instead of me, I almost missed it. That's the cruel elegance of it. It doesn't announce the takeover. It waits until you're no longer sure you were needed. I spoke out loud one morning just to test myself. I'm going to leave today. The sentence sounded correct, logical, necessary. The house did nothing. No sound. No resistance. For a few seconds, hope flared, thin, dangerous. Then the pressure arrived. Not above me, not behind me. Inside the space of the decision itself. The urge to sit. The sense that leaving could wait. The certainty that nothing outside required immediate attention. I sat down. The sentence dissolved before it could become intent. I didn't feel controlled. I felt relieved. That realization made my hands shake. The ceiling stopped existing in my thoughts. That should have terrified me. Instead, it felt efficient. I no longer tracked where the beams were. I no longer measured space above my head. My awareness flattened, focused forward, downward, inward, exactly as it preferred. I noticed the house behaving differently when I moved without hesitation. Doors opened fully instead of partially. Floors stayed silent. Air flowed smoothly around me. When I hesitated, everything felt heavier. The message was clear. Decisiveness was rewarded. And I was learning. I caught my reflection by accident, not in a mirror, in the dark screen of my phone. My face looked calmer, less strained. The constant vigilance etched into my features had softened. I stared at it longer than I should have. That's not right, I whispered. The thought arrived gently, like a correction from someone who knows you well. You're resting. I put the phone down. I didn't want to see my face agreeing. Sounds still happened, but they weren't above me anymore. They were with me, A floorboard creaked when I shifted my weight, exactly once. The walls sighed when I exhaled deeply. The house responded in synchrony, not echo, coordination. One night, half asleep, I heard my own voice speaking from the kitchen, a full sentence, measured, calm. "I'll take care of it." I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Silence followed. I waited for fear. It didn't come. What came instead was a quiet certainty that something had handled what I no longer needed to. People stopped crossing my mind, not emotionally, structurally. I forgot how to imagine conversation, how to anticipate responses, how to prepare explanations. The house didn't require explanation. It already knew. That's when I understood what the thing in the ceiling had always wanted. Not entry, not descent, delegation. It never needed my body, it needed my decisions. And I was handing them over willingly. The final sign came quietly. I stood beneath the central beam, the place that once terrified me, and felt nothing. No pressure, no awareness, no presence. The ceiling wasn't watching, because it no longer needed to. The thought arrived, complete and unchallenged. This position no longer requires supervision. I smiled, not because I was happy, because smiling felt appropriate. And somewhere, deep in the structure of the house, something settled, permanent, aligned, finished. I didn't disappear. That's the lie people tell because it's easier to survive endings when they're clean. What happened to me was quieter and far worse. Time no longer moved forward. It distributed itself. Morning and night lost their meaning. Light came through the windows, then left without urgency. Hunger arrived without demand. Fatigue existed without weight. I watched myself move through the house with practiced certainty. I walked without hesitation, chose rooms instinctively, avoided nothing. The house responded immediately. Doors opened fully, floors stayed silent, air shifted smoothly, like breath shared between familiar bodies. The ceiling was irrelevant now. That was the most horrifying part. I tried to interrupt once, just once. A thought sharpened itself inside me, desperate and raw. "Don't stand there." The body paused, for less than a heartbeat. Then the pause corrected itself. Movement resumed. The thought dissolved, not rejected, absorbed. That's when I understood my new function. I wasn't silenced, I was outpaced. The house no longer reacted to sound. It reacted to intention. When intention was clear, everything flowed. When intention fractured, pressure returned. Not threatening, just corrective, guiding, efficient. I felt myself thinning, spreading out across moments rather than inhabiting them fully. Awareness no longer anchored to action. Thought no longer guaranteed authorship. I existed in the margins of choice. A hesitation, a faint discomfort. The impulse people ignore when something feels wrong, but nothing looks wrong enough to justify stopping. That was me now. Sometimes people came, rarely. A delivery driver, a man asking for directions. Once, a couple curious about the land nearby. I felt urgency then, a tightening. I tried to push forward, to warn, and sometimes something happened. A pause, a glance back toward the road, an apology before leaving. Those were my victories, small, unreliable. Enough to remind me I hadn't vanished, enough to remind me I was tolerated. The ceiling never moved again. Not because it was empty, because it was finished. Whatever had once shifted above me no longer needed position, weight, or sound. It existed as structure now, as expectation, as the shape of thought before thought realized itself. The thing didn't crawl down, it didn't descend, it distributed itself through routine, through comfort, through the quiet satisfaction of decisions made without friction. That was its final form. If you're listening to this now, understand something. Some horrors don't chase you. They don't scream. They don't force entry. They wait. They let you get tired, let you adjust, let you stop looking up. And when you finally decide the silence is preferable to vigilance, when you accept that nothing happening feels like peace, they don't take you. They replace the part of you that insists on being present. If you ever hear something moving where it shouldn't, if the house feels too cooperative, if resistance starts to feel unnecessary, pay attention. Because the most dangerous thing a presence can do is make itself feel no longer worth noticing. Once that happens, you won't need to disappear. You'll simply stop insisting that the space belongs to you, and something else will remain.